Every eye in the ballroom followed the Duke. Every eye but hers. Mary Ann Ellison stood in the shadow of a marble pillar at the far end of the Carrow House assembly, and she watched the wrong man. While 200 people turned like sunflowers toward the Duke of Rothmere as he entered, while mothers pinched colour into their daughters' cheeks, and her own sister Beatrice went luminous and pink at the centre of the floor, Mary Ann kept her gaze fixed on the slender, pale-haired gentleman by the card-room door. Viscount Alderton. He was smiling at nothing, tapping his signet ring against the door frame in a slow, patient rhythm, like a man counting down to something only he could see. She knew that rhythm. She had heard it once before, in her dead father's study, the night before her father stopped sleeping. "Mary Ann?" Beatrice appeared at her elbow, breathless, radiant, 20 years old and made entirely of hope. "He's here. He's actually come. Mama says he has 18,000 a year and no wife. And she says, do I look well? Tell me the truth. Do I look well?" "You look like the answer to a prayer," Mary Ann said, and meant it, and squeezed her sister's gloved hand. "Go, they're forming the set." Beatrice went. She glided into the light where she belonged, golden and certain, and every eligible gentleman in the room recalculated his evening around her. That was how it had always been. Beatrice was the family's fortune, the beauty their mother displayed like plate at a dinner. Mary Ann was the one who did the sums after the guests went home, who copied her father's legal papers in a hand as neat as print, who at 23 had quietly become the person nobody watched. She preferred it. Being unwatched was how she had learned everything worth knowing. And she knew, for instance, that the Duke of Rothmere had not come to Carrow House for a wife. She knew it because of the small folded paper tucked into the wrist of her left glove, warm now from her own skin, and because of the iron key that hung on a faded blue ribbon looped twice about that same wrist, half hidden by lace. She knew it the way one knows a storm by the pressure in the ear before the first thunder. She only did not know that he was already crossing the room toward her. He came without hurry, and the crowd parted for him the way water parts for the prow of a ship. And Mary Ann saw the exact moment her mother realized his course. Honoria Ellison's face bloomed. He is coming to Beatrice. And then curdled by degrees as the Duke passed Beatrice's set entirely. Past the Harcourt girls with their 30,000. Past the celebrated Miss Vane. He walked the length of that ballroom under the weight of every stare in Wiltshire, and he stopped in front of the pillar, in front of the sister no one had bothered to introduce him to, and he inclined his dark head. He was tall, and he did not move quite evenly. A stiffness in the left leg he carried as though daring anyone to name it. A thin white scar split one eyebrow. His eyes, when they found hers, were dark as steeped tea, and entirely, alarmingly awake. And he did not smile the practice smile he had worn for the room. Up close, he looked like a man who had not slept properly in a year. "Miss Ellison," he said. His voice was low, and it reached her before it could reach anyone else. "You are the only person here not looking at me. I find I cannot bear it. Will you dance?" 200 people forgot to breathe. Somewhere behind her, Mary Ann heard her mother make a small sound like a kettle. "You have not been introduced to me, Your Grace," Mary Ann said. "No," he agreed. "I have committed every sin the room can invent tonight, and I have not yet begun. Dance with me, and I will confess the rest." She should have refused. A woman with sense refuses. But his eyes had dropped, once, to the blue ribbon at her wrist, to the key, and then come back to her face, and in that half-second she understood that the Duke of Rothmere knew exactly what that key opened, and that he had crossed a ballroom in front of the whole county to stand where he could ask her about it, without a single soul hearing. So he had not come for a wife. He had come for what her father left behind. "One dance," Marianne said, and gave him her hand. They took the floor as the music began, and she felt the county's astonishment settle over her shoulders like a shawl of ice. This is going to be devastating, she thought, with the strange, clear calm of someone who has waited a long time for the roof to fall. And she still did not know the half of it. His hand at her waist was careful, as though she was something that might go off. "You know who I am," he said, low, as they turned. "Everyone knows who you are. That is rather the difficulty of being you. You know why I have come. I know you did not come for the dancing." She let the term carry her close, and then away. "You favor your left leg, Your Grace, and you are hiding it, which means you did not come here to be admired. And you looked at my wrist before you looked at my face. Men look at a woman's face first, unless they have already decided she is a means to an end." She lifted her chin. "So, what did my father have of yours?" Something moved across his face. Not offense, relief almost, and under it something rawer, that he shut away at once. "Not mine," he said. "Ours. Yours and mine both, though you may not thank me for it when you understand." He was quiet a moment, guiding her through the figure, and then, so softly she felt it more than heard it. "Your father was Thomas Ellison, attorney of Marlbury. 22 years ago he drew the conveyance of the Ashcombe lands for the 7th Duke of Rothmere, my father. He kept the counterpart deed in his own strongbox because he did not trust the man who wanted it lost." His dark eyes held her. "You wear the key to that box on your wrist to a ball, Miss Ellison, which tells me you are cleverer and more frightened than anyone in this room has ever guessed." Marianne's heart struck once, hard against her stays. That was the first crack, not in him, in her. In one sentence, he had seen straight through 3 years of careful invisibility to the frightened, watchful girl beneath, and she felt it land like a small, clean wound, the kind that does not bleed until later. No one had looked at her, truly looked, in longer than she could remember. That the first man to do it should be the most dangerous one in England seemed exactly like her luck. "If you know all that," she said, when she had her voice, "you do not need me. You need a locksmith." "I need the deed," he said, "and I need it before Wednesday, when Viscount Alderton means to stand up in the Court of Chancery and swear that the Ashcombe lands were sold to his family by fraud and that the true conveyance was destroyed. He has a deed of his own, Miss Ellison, a beautiful one. Seals, witnesses, my father's signature." His jaw tightened. "Every word of it is a lie, and it is good enough to take 3,000 a year and the last of my family's name. Unless somewhere in a strongbox in Marlbury there is an honest paper that says otherwise." Across the room, by the card-room door, Viscount Alderton had stopped tapping his ring. He was watching them dance, and he was smiling now with his whole pale face. And Marianne felt that smile, like a hand laid flat against the back of her neck. "He is watching us," she said. "He has been watching your family for a month," the Duke answered, and turned her so that his broad shoulders came between her and that smile. "He does not yet know what you carry. Let us keep it that way. Do not look at him again." The music ended. He bowed, she curtsied, and under the cover of it, his mouth barely moving, he said, "Farley Abbey, the East Library, tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Come as though calling on my sister. She is expecting you. It is arranged, and it is respectable. I will explain everything, and then you may decide what to do with the only thing that can save 2 families or ruin them both." He straightened. He walked away without a backward glance, and the whole room exhaled and began at once to talk. Beatrice reached her first, eyes enormous. "Marianne, the Duke of Rothmere danced with you. With you! Mamma has had to sit down." "It was only a dance," Marianne said, and heard how thin the lie was. But she carried the key home in her fist all the way. And she did not sleep either. Farley Abbey sat grey and enormous in a cup of the Downs, older than the title, older than the county. And Marianne was received in the East Library by a footman who had plainly been told to expect her. The Duke's sister, Lady Cecilia, put in a warm and entirely genuine appearance of exactly 4 minutes. Long enough to make the visit unimpeachable, wise enough to leave, and then Marianne was alone, with the Duke of Rothmere, among 10,000 books and a fire that could not quite warm the room. "You came," he said. He had not slept. She could see it plainer by daylight. "I confess I doubted you would." "I came because you frightened me last night, and I have learned that the things that frighten me are the things I must look at directly." She drew off her gloves and did not sit. "You said 2 families. Explain the second one." "Mine." He did. He unrolled a copy, only a copy, he was careful to say, of the deed Alderton meant to swear to, and set beside it a bundle of her father's letters, bought, he admitted without shame, from the man who had cleared her father's office after his death. Marianne's hand went to her mouth, his careful, upright hand, that she had learned to imitate so exactly that in his last 2 years half the wills in Marlbury had been engrossed by her fingers and signed by his. "Your father witnessed the true sale," the Duke said. "He knew Alderton's father had bought that land honestly from mine, and then, 30 years on, wanted to reclaim it by pretending the sale was fraud, because the honest price had been low, and the land was now worth 10 times over. Your father held a counterpart deed that proved the true history, and Alderton's father paid him." He drew a slip from the bundle. "Every quarter day for 11 years. £120 a year to hold his tongue and keep the box shut." The fire cracked. Marianne stood very still. £120 a year. It was the annuity, the whole of it, that kept her mother in her house and Beatrice in the gowns that would win her a husband. Arriving quarterly since her father's death, from a source her mother had never questioned and Marianne had never dared to. Not a widow's jointure at all. The price of a good man's silence. And it was still being paid. "So," she said, and her voice did not shake, which she was proud of for the rest of her life. "If I give you the true deed, I save your 3,000 a year, and I brand my dead father a man who was bought. And the moment Alderton knows the box is open, the payments stop, and my mother loses her house, and my sister loses her season." She looked up at him. "Save 2 families, or ruin them both." "That is what you meant." "Yes," the Duke of Rothmere said, and to his credit, he did not look away from it. "I will not pretend it is a fair thing I am asking. I have nothing that makes it fair." And there was the moment the whole story turned. The moment she stopped being a girl deciding whether to help a duke and became a woman holding two families' lives in one closed hand. She had thought the key at her wrist made her, for once, the person with the power. It did. That was exactly the trouble. Power was not the thing she had imagined from the shadow of the pillar. Power was this: a locked box, two ruins, and no clean way through. "Why did you tell me?" she said at last. "You are a duke. You could have sent men to Marlbury to take the box when I danced. You could have bought me the way Alderton bought my father. Why cross a ballroom and tell me the one thing that lets me refuse you?" He was silent for a long moment. When he answered, it was not the answer of a duke. "Because a year ago, my brother Julian sat where you are sitting," he said, "and I did not tell him the truth in time. Alderton ruined him first, a lesser matter, a debt made to look like cheating at cards, a lie good enough to close every door in London. I thought I could fix it quietly, with money and rank, without ever letting Julian see how much danger he was in. I was protecting him." His mouth twisted. He shot himself in the gun room in October because he thought the shame was his and he was alone in it. And I had all the truth in my desk and never gave him the dignity of it. He looked at her, and for one unguarded instant, the Duke of Rothmere was simply a man who had watched his brother buried and understood it was his own silence that dug the grave. "I will not manage another person into ruin for their own good. Not you. You will have the truth entire, and the choice entire, or you will have nothing from me at all." Marianne's throat ached. She had come prepared for a great man's charm, his money, his pressure. She had not come prepared for his honesty, and it undid her far more thoroughly than any of the rest could have. "Adrian," Lady Cecilia's voice called, distant from the corridor. His Christian name, and Marianne heard it and had the strange thought that she should not know it, that it was too intimate a thing to have overheard. "Go," he said quietly, though the moment had not truly been interrupted. His sister's voice had only reminded them both that this room had walls, and that walls could be listened at. "Take the letters. Take the copy of his deed. Read your father with your own eyes and no duke breathing over your shoulder. And then decide. Whatever you decide, I will hold to it." He hesitated, and then, as if it cost him, "But decide by Tuesday night. On Wednesday, Alderton swears his lie, and after that no honest paper on earth will matter, because the court would have believed him." She took the letters. At the door she stopped, because she could not help it, because the man had turned away to the fire and stood there favouring his bad leg, with his shoulders bowed, and a something no title had ever lightened. "Your Grace," she said, "stop apologizing. You are not the one who wronged my father. My father wronged himself, and Alderton wronged us both. And you are the only man in 11 years to come and tell me so to my face." She lifted her chin, though he could not see it. "I do not need your guilt. Tell me plainly what you mean to do, and I will decide whether I stand with you." He turned. Something had changed in his face, the thing a man's face does when he has been braced for pity and receives, instead, a partner. "I mean to break him," said the Duke of Rothmere very quietly, "in a room full of witnesses, with the truth. If you let me, if you stand with me, I mean to end Gerald Elderton in front of everyone who ever helped him ruin my brother." A breath. Stand with me, Miss Ellison. And neither of us does it alone. Marianne, she said, before she could think better of it. If we are to burn down the county together, you may as well use my name. The distance between them, in that instant, was one long library and 20 years of rank and every rule England had ever written. And it was, she felt with a lurch, already far too small. She read her father for 2 days. She read him while her mother planned Beatrice's next 3 balls in blissful ignorance. And what she found was worse and better than shame both at once. Thomas Ellison had not sold his silence for greed. He had done it in the first failing year of Beatrice's life, with 2 small daughters and a wife and an emptying purse, telling himself it harmed no one, and then found he could not get out. Every year he took it, the deeper the hook set. In the margins of his letter book, in the upright hand she knew better than her own, she found the sentence that broke her. When Marianne is grown, she will find the box, and she will be wiser than her father was. He had left her the key on purpose. He had left her the whole choice on purpose, because he had not been able to make it himself. She read it aloud, alone, and laughed, and found her face was wet. On Tuesday, she sent no word to Farley Abbey. She simply went to Marlbury, to the shuttered office that was now hers, and she knelt before the iron strongbox in the corner and turned her father's key in the lock she had worn at her wrist to a ball. The bolt gave with a sound like a held breath let go. The second time that small iron key had turned the whole course of her life, though she did not know yet it would turn a third. Inside lay the counterpart deed of the Ashcombe conveyance, 22 years old, sealed and witnessed and true, in her father's hand, and beneath it, folded smaller, something she had not expected. Her father's own signed and dated memorandum of every payment Alderton's family had ever made him. Why and for what? A confession, addressed to no one, kept against a day he did not live to see. He had not only left her the weapon that saved the Duke, he had left her the weapon that destroyed Alderton, and taken care to sign it, so that no one could ever call his daughter a forger for producing it. Marianne knelt on the cold floor a long time with both papers in her lap. She thought of her mother's house and Beatrice's season, and the £120 that would stop the instant she carried these into the light. She thought of a man in a gunroom in October who had died believing he was alone. She thought of the Duke of Rothmere saying, "You will have the choice entire." Then she wrapped both papers in oilskin and locked the empty box and walked out into the grey afternoon to burn her family's security to the ground with her own 2 hands. She reached Farley Abbey as the light was failing, unannounced, mud to the hem, and they showed her into the East Library because the Duke had left standing orders that she was to be admitted at any hour, which told her how little he too had slept. He came in at a near run, saw her face, saw the oilskin packet, and stopped dead. "You do not have to," he said. "Marianne, whatever you have decided, I told you the price. If you have brought it to tell me you cannot pay it, I will find another road. I will not take your mother's roof to save my own." "I know you would not," she said. "That is precisely why I am giving it to you." She crossed the room and put the packet into his hands, and closed his fingers over it with both of hers. And they were very close then, closer than the whole of England permitted, near enough that she could see the exhaustion and the disbelief, and the beginning of something else war in his dark eyes. "My father left me the choice because he could not make it. I have made it, not for you, your grace, for him, For your brother, who died alone, when I have spent 3 years watching my father die of loneliness in plain sight and doing nothing. Her voice caught. I am done being the one nobody watches while she does the sums. Take it. Break him. His hand came up. For one unbearable moment, his fingers hovered at the line of her jaw, not touching, close enough that she felt the warmth of them, and the whole ballroom of the world narrowed to the half-inch of air between his hand and her skin. And she did not step back, and neither of them breathed, and the library door opened, and a footman said, Your Grace, forgive me, but Viscount Alderton is at the door, and will not be turned away. He says he knows Miss Ellison's carriage. The half-inch closed to nothing, and then, worse, to everything. The Duke's hand dropped. The moment did not break so much as it was confiscated, and Marianne felt the air go out of the room, and understood, standing there flushed and undone, exactly how much she had been about to let happen, and exactly how much it would have cost her if it had. He followed me, she whispered. Then he already knows, the Duke said grimly, closing the oilskin packet into a drawer and turning the lock. Or he is about to. Marianne, say nothing of what you carried. Let him believe you came for the reason the whole county believes you came. Let him think you are only the Duke's odd little conquest. His eyes found hers, urgent. It is the one shield we have. Can you play the fool who dreams above her station? Can you let him laugh at you? She thought of every drawing-room in Wiltshire already laughing at the plain Ellison girl who fancied a duke. She thought of how much easier it was to be underestimated than to be seen. Watch me, she said. Viscount Alderton came in on a wave of cold air and courtesy, pale and elegant and pleased. And he had brought 2 of his friends as witnesses, because a gentleman does not call alone on a duke he means to accuse, and because cruelty enjoys an audience. He took in the scene at a glance, the muddy hem, the firelight, the Duke and the attorney's daughter alone. His pale eyes gleamed. Rothmere, he said, and Miss Ellison, forgive the hour, only I saw the little Ellison carriage on the Marlbury Road, and I said to Foster, surely not. Surely the child has not driven alone to Farleigh Abbey at dusk. And here she is. He smiled at Marianne with enormous gentleness. My dear, you will ruin yourself. A man like the Duke does not marry a country attorney's daughter. He amuses himself. You are too plain to be anything else to him, and too poor to survive being anything else at all. Go home to your mother. It was expertly done. It was meant to make her flinch, to make her small, to send her running so that whatever she had carried to Farleigh Abbey went home unspoken in her shaking hands. Marianne let her lip tremble. She let her eyes fill. She gathered her muddy skirts and dropped a curtsy too low, the curtsy of a girl who has been reminded of her place. And she said, in a small and foolish voice, You are quite right, my lord. I forget myself. I will go home. And she saw Alderton's shoulders loosen with satisfaction, saw him mark her down as handled, harmless, dealt with, saw the exact moment he stopped counting her as a person who mattered. Good, she thought, with her father's cold, clear patience. Do not look at me again. You heard the lady, said the Duke of Rothmere, in a voice of perfect boredom that she would love him for later. She is leaving, as are you, Alderton. Whatever you came to say to me, say it Wednesday, in court, where you are so confident of your welcome. Alderton's smile thinned. Wednesday, he agreed softly. Yes. Wednesday I take back what your family stole, and your father's name goes into the mud beside it. Enjoy your last honest night, Duke. He bowed. He swept his witnesses out, and at the door he paused, and for 1/2 second his pale eyes flicked to the faded blue ribbon at Marianne's wrist. The key, empty of meaning to him, a girl's trinket, and passed over it, and dismissed it, and left. He had looked straight at the thing that would end him and seen nothing. It was the last mistake Gerald Alderton ever made in Wiltshire. But the cost came first, as it always does. It came Tuesday night, in the dark, after Marianne had gone home to a house that did not yet know it was already lost. She had been home an hour when the note arrived, not from the Duke, from Alderton. He had not been fooled by the curtsy after all, or not entirely. The note was brief and beautifully written. He knew, it said, that she had opened her father's box. If one honest paper appeared in Chancery on Wednesday, he would produce her father's quarterly receipts, 11 years of signatures, and swear that Thomas Ellison had forged the counterpart deed for pay, that the whole family were confederates in fraud. Marianne would not merely lose the annuity. She would lose her father's name, her sister's marriage, her own liberty. There were words for what he described. And prisons. Burn the box's contents and stay home, the note said, and the payments continue and no one is harmed. Or come to court and take your whole family into the pit with the Duke. Marianne sat with it in a cold kitchen at 1 a.m, and for the first time she believed her great choice might not be enough. That Beatrice would wake in a debtor's world. That the plain Ellison girl who reached above her station would drag down everyone she loved on her way up. She thought of writing to the Duke, of what he would do, put himself between her and the ruin, take the whole weight onto his own name, exactly as he had tried for Julian and could not. And she understood, sitting there, that he would not save her from this. He would only stand with her in it, if she came. That was the terrible gift of him. She did not sleep. But before dawn she stopped shaking, because her father's memorandum lay open in her lap, and she had read the thing Alderton did not know she held. Not just the receipts, but her father's own dated confession of who had paid them and why. He thought the receipts proved her father a forger. In her father's own hand, they proved Alderton a briber and a thief. He had threatened her with the one weapon that turned 3 inches, killed him. He had not read to the bottom of the box. She had. The Court of Chancery on Wednesday was not a ballroom, but it was full, and every face turned when the doors opened. For word had run through the county like fire in stubble that the Duke of Rothmere would answer Viscount Alderton's astonishing claim. And society does love to watch the great fall. Marianne came in on no one's arm, in grey, the blue ribbon at her wrist, a plain leather folio in her hands, and took a seat among the public, where a poor attorney's daughter belonged. Alderton, at the front in his fine coat, saw her and smiled, because he thought she had come to watch him win. The Duke did not look at her. That had been agreed. He sat grim and still, while Alderton's counsel spun the lie, the fraudulent conveyance, the destroyed true deed, the noble line robbed by grasping Rothmeres. And it was, Marianne had to grant, a beautiful lie, seamless and sworn. She watched the commissioners begin to believe it. She watched 3,000 a year and a dead man's name slide toward the pit. And when Alderton's counsel said, with a flourish, that of course no honest counterdeed existed, that none had ever existed, that the Rothmeres had nothing to show but bluster. The Duke of Rothmere rose. "I have a witness," he said, "to the true conveyance of the Ashcombe lands. The attorney who drew it kept the counterpart deed against exactly this day. He is dead. But his papers are here, and so is the person who holds them, who came into their possession honestly, by inheritance, and who is prepared to swear to their provenance." He turned at last and looked at Marianne across the whole crowded court. And there was nothing bored in his face now. "Miss Marianne Ellison, daughter of Thomas Ellison, attorney of Marlbury. Will you come forward?" The room turned. Alderton's smile did not fall at once. It curdled, exactly as her mother's had at the ball, by slow, astonished degrees, as he understood that the plain girl he had frightened with a note at midnight had not burned the box and had not stayed home. That she had come. That the trinket at her wrist had been a key after all. Marianne stood. She walked the length of that courtroom under the weight of every stare, the way she had once watched a dupe do it. And she did not favour any leg or drop any curtsy. And when she reached the front, she opened her plain leather folio. "My Lord Viscount," she said, and her voice carried, clear and steady, to the very back. "You sent me a letter last night. You told me that if I brought my father's papers into this room, you would swear he was a forger and take my family into the pit." She heard the crowd stir. "I have brought them anyway. I would like to explain why I am not afraid of you." She laid the true counterpart deed before the commissioners first. 22 years old, sealed, witnessed, unmistakably genuine, and unmistakably contradicting every word Alderton had sworn. She watched his lie die on the table in front of him. But she did not stop there, because it was not enough for the Duke to win. Julian had needed more than a quiet victory, and so did every plain girl who had ever been told to go home to her mother. "And this," Marianne said, laying down the second paper, her father's signed and dated memorandum, "is my father's own record, in his own hand, of the £120 a year that your family paid him for 11 years. Not for a forgery, my lord, but for his silence. You paid a poor, honest man to keep the true deed in the dark, because you knew it was true. You have not come to this court to recover stolen land. You have come to steal it, in open daylight, with a beautiful forged deed and a dead man's ruined name for cover. And you would have carried my father's memory into the pit to do it." She lifted her eyes to his white, frozen face, and gave the county the sentence it had waited the whole story to hear. "My father was weak, my lord, and he took your money, and he was ashamed of it every day until he died. But he kept the truth. He kept it for 22 years in an iron box, and he left me the key, because he trusted that one day his daughter would be braver than he was." She closed the folio. "I am." The court erupted. The Duke of Rothmere did not orchestrate the ruin of Gerald Alderton. He witnessed it, sat perfectly still, and let the whole room watch a country attorney's overlooked daughter dismantle a viscount with 2 papers and 1 clear voice. And the only thing he did was to be the man who had crossed a ballroom to find her, and trusted her with the choice entire. Alderton's counsel folded. Alderton himself half rose, white to the lips, and found there was nothing to say, because the truth was on the table, in a dead man's signed hand. By nightfall, the story was in every drawing-room in Wiltshire. Not that the Duke had defended himself, but that a girl no one had bothered to look at had walked into Chancery alone and ended a viscount where he stood. Afterward, in the emptying court, in the din and press of it, the Duke reached her at last. He did not care who watched. He took both her hands in both of his, and his dark eyes were wet and blazing at once. And he said, low and unsteady, "You did not have to do it so completely. I would have settled for surviving. You gave me back Julian's name in the bargain. You rooted him for my brother, and you never even knew Julian. And I—" His voice failed him. A duke's voice, failing in open court. "Marianne, I have nothing that makes this fair. I never did. I have only myself, and my name, and everything they carry. And I am asking you to take all of it, not because you saved me, though you did, but because in a room full of people who have looked at me my whole life, you are the only one who ever saw me. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life being the man you already decided I could be." The whole county was watching now, every eye in the room, and Marianne Ellison, who had once stood in the shadow of a pillar and watched the wrong man on purpose, looked up at the right one and did not lower her voice at all. "On one condition," she said, "you will stop apologizing, and you will never once, as long as we live, try to protect me from a truth I have the right to face." She was smiling and crying, and entirely unashamed of both. "Those are my terms, Your Grace. Meet them, and I am yours." "Adrian," he said, half a laugh, wrecked and joyful, "if we are to burn down the county together, you had better use my name." He kissed her there, in the court of Chancery, in front of everyone who had ever told her to go home to her mother. And it was not a stolen half-inch withheld behind a library door, but the whole of it at last. The release of a pressure that had been building since a ballroom pillar. And the county gasped, and some fool cheered, and Marianne Ellison stopped being the sister no one chose in exactly the moment she stopped caring whether anyone chose her at all. Beatrice married the following spring, a cheerful, besotted baronet, with a decent property and no forged deeds whatsoever, for love, and for once with no one's fortune riding on her face. The £120 did stop. It was not missed. A duchess's sister does not want for dowry, and Marianne saw to it herself from her own settlement. As for Gerald Alderton, Chancery found against him within the month. His forged deed put his own liberty in question, and he did not wait for the answer. He sold what was left and took a packet to Calais before the winter. And the last anyone heard, he was living small and bitter in a hired room, tapping his signet ring against a window that looked out on nothing he owned. A year later, on a bright, cold morning at Farley Abbey, Marianne stood in the muniment room and turned a small iron key in the lock. The same key, the third time it had turned the course of her life, and by far the happiest. Adrian had had it taken off the faded blue ribbon and set on the ring of household keys that hung at her waist now. The keys of a duchess, who kept the truth of a great house in her own two hands, because her husband trusted her with it entire. Inside, in a place of honour among the Rothmere deeds, lay the true Ashcombe conveyance, and, beneath it, her father's signed memorandum, his confession and his courage both. She did not hide them. She had learned what hiding the truth cost a family. She let them lie in the light, where any honest person might read them. And on the worst days, and the best, she turned the key and read the sentence that had once made her weep on a cold office floor. When Marianne is grown, she will find the box, and she will be wiser than her father was. "I found it," she told him, quietly, the way she did each year on the day. "You may rest now." "I found it, and I was." Behind her the door opened, and Adrian came in, favouring the leg he no longer bothered to hide from her, and put his arms around his wife and his chin on the top of her head. Together the Duke and Duchess of Rothmere looked at the 2 honest papers a poor attorney had kept for 22 years, and at the small key that had opened them, and at the whole unlikely road from a ballroom pillar to this warm, bright room. And neither of them, for the rest of a long and happy life, ever once looked away.